Welcome back in part number 2 of every game on the board with our two-hole hitter, Teddy Covers, at Teddy_covers on Twitter. Check him out, Wager Talk and sportsmemo.com. Teddy, welcome in. How you feeling, buddy?
Hey, great to be here, Drew, man. I mean, here we are, mid-November already. We've got this week, we got next week, and then we got conference championship games. So the college football season is a sprint, and it's been a sprint, and here we are in the stretch run. So looking forward to giving you guys some analysis for today and hopefully giving you a couple of winners along the road.
Absolutely, guys. We're going part number 2 here, 345, 346, Northwestern, Purdue, all the way down to 373, 374, UAB and LSU. If you're new to the Every Game on the Board podcast, we hit every single game on the college football betting board. If you go to Wager Talk, hit the live odds screen. We're going down in numerical order, those little numbers to the left of the team names. So heading to the Big Ten, up first, 9 a.m. Pacific kick here. Teddy, kicking us off on Saturday. Northwestern and Purdue, Boilermakers, minus 19, minus 18.5 point home favorites, 45.5 being the total.
So here's your random stat of the week.
Oh, yeah.
Northwestern at Purdue. They haven't lost in more than a decade. It's been five straight road wins for the Wildcats in this series. Now, Purdue did get some payback last year in Evanston, but the fact that Northwestern has won each of their last 5 times on this field, and the fact that in the very convoluted Big Ten West, Purdue is in the driver's seat to make the championship game to face the Ohio State-Michigan winner. There's certainly ample motivation for the home team in this one. Northwestern, I talked about it last week. I have not had a good read on the Wildcats. The Wildcats have been fairly simple to handicap. You bet against them, you made money this year. And we've seen, the game against Ohio State, they fought. Last week against Minnesota, there wasn't that much fight there. I'm not convinced that a team that hasn't won a game since beating Northwestern on opening day, that the fight is left in the Wildcats. And again, we're talking about a team that has scored 13 or less, 14 or less, I should say, in 6 of their last 7 ball games. This offense doesn't work. I can only lay it with Purdue, but again, you're not getting any bargains to lay here with the Boilermakers.
Good start here, Teddy, in the Big Ten, heading down the list. Actually, Coastal Carolina and Virginia canceled due to, I believe, 3 football players on Virginia being killed, Teddy. I guess just quickly, obviously a terrible tragedy here. From a betting perspective, is there anything you kind of take from this with either Virginia or Coastal Carolina going forward? They're not going to play this weekend.
Not really. I haven't seen any of the Cavs quotes. We'll see what happens if Virginia suits up against Virginia Tech next week. Again, there was 3 players that were killed. A 4th player was shot. And the guy who is the shooter was also involved with the football team. So I don't know what's going to happen with Virginia. For Coastal Carolina, they got a bye week that they weren't expecting, which may help them in some way. But honestly, I haven't even looked. I don't even know who they play next week. So it's not anything that at this stage I spend any time trying to cap because there's no game this week. We'll worry about it next week.
Next game up, 349, 350, 330 Eastern, Georgia at Kentucky. Bulldogs minus 22.5 point road favorites, 49 being the total in Lexington, Teddy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm in any rush to step in front of Georgia in this matchup. And again, I mean, Kentucky may have gotten caught looking ahead last week against Vanderbilt. But I watched that game, and if you watch that game at any point, you're not playing Kentucky this week. Vanderbilt was a better team. And when Vandy's better than you are and beats you, then you play Kentucky the next week. It's not necessarily an easy, they're going to bounce back this week, especially with Levis is the guy who was quoted as the potential number 1 overall draft pick. It's clear he's not healthy. It's clear he's not playing well. And it's clear that if you can't move the football against Vanderbilt's defense, you're likely to have a problem moving the football against Georgia's defense. Now, do you want to be laying in this point spread range with Georgia at this stage of the season, knowing the pressure that's on them, et cetera, et cetera? And the undefeated teams, the teams that are playing for bigger prizes, they can be a minefield at this time of year. The pressure just mounts, it builds, it mounts, it builds. So I'm not excited to lay it with Georgia, but I know I don't want Kentucky here. Maybe looking at an under in a game where I would think we're more likely to see a defensive scrum than an offensive shootout.
9 a.m. kick for our next one. 351-352 UConn at Army. We're seeing Army mostly -10 home favorites, 43.5 being the total. Teddy, is UConn actually decent this year?
So the first time, I don't know if you remember, but we talked about it. I think it might have been week 2 or week 3 on the show. And I'm like, I watched UConn play in the opener against Utah State. I'm like, this is a different team.
Yeah, I do
and
remember.
They were. And they've been a point spread machine. What are they now? 7 straight covers after upsetting Liberty last week. And again, it was a goalpost come down kind of win against Liberty. Remember, the previous week, Liberty pulled off a pretty big upset of their own in SEC country. So to see UConn beat that team, they are better. The hype is there. You worry about the spot for the Huskies this week. But from a talent standpoint, Army's not 10 points better than UConn. Look at what's Army done this year? All right. These are their wins. They beat Villanova. Okay. They beat Colgate. Okay. Those are both FCS squads. All right. And the signature win against a Division I opponent, FBS opponent, came against Louisiana Monroe. All right. The offense hasn't gotten to 10 in each of the last 2 weeks. This is not a team I want to lay double digit with. And in theory, again, you got a flat UConn squad and an Army team that if they win out, and that includes the game against Navy in their finale, they're still going to be bowl eligible. They'll be 6-6 if they win their final 3 games. They got UMass next week, so in theory, they should win it. But I don't trust Army in this point spread range, and I'm not convinced UConn is at the level yet that we say, all right, let down. I'm just not convinced that's the case. Now, if you're not disciplined against Army and you're not focused, you'll get smacked. And I understand why the point spread is where it is, but this isn't a case where I'm a game where I'm interested in the favorite.
Great start here to the slate. 353-354 up next, 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific kick in the AAC, Teddy. Houston and ECU. We're seeing the Pirates -6 point home favorites. High total here, 67.5. Are you liking anything in the American?
So I've watched East Carolina a lot this year for whatever reason. I watched the game against Cincy last week. And there wasn't a whole lot of difference between the 2 teams on the field. This Pirate squad that has been solid. They've been a good point spread team this season with Ehlers at QB, and Ehlers a QB who makes some mistakes against the better defenses that he faces. That being said, in his senior year, he's been good, and they haven't been turning the ball over. 0 turnovers each of their last 4 ball games. They're +7 during that span. The defense has been able to create takeaways. The offense hasn't been giving them away. All of which are positive signs for East Carolina. But from a point spread standpoint, look at this number. I'll call this my disappointing point spread of the week. I was hoping this number was going to be a good notch or two lower than it actually is. I thought I might be able to lay a field goal with East Carolina in this ball game. That's not the case. Houston's defense, their last 2 games against Temple and SMU, they've given up 77 and 36. They've given up well over 800 yards passing during that span. And when, again, you all of a sudden you're here in November, you start looking at Houston's season. This defense hasn't stopped anybody all year. All right.
Yeah. No.
That said, the offense is capable of trading points with anybody, and they have been all year. Lean over in this one. Wish the number was a little bit lower. If it was lower, I'd probably be on the East Carolina side.
Teddy covers our number 2 hole hitter every game on the board. He's making money right now at Wager Talk and sportsmemo.com. Up over 70% winners last 3 days. If you're looking for an NBA handicapper, guys, 65% so far in the month of November in the association, and 71% NFL in the month of November. Guys, his NFL as good as anybody out there since 2015. Teddy covers Wager Talk, sportsmemo.com. Obviously knows his college football. Next game up, staying in the American, Cincinnati and Temple. 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific kick here, Teddy. -17. That's the Bearcats as the road favorite. 51 being the total in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, his number feels a little lofty to me. It really does. Considering Cincinnati's offense, 31, 28, 29, 21, 20, 27. That's not a let's lay 3 scores of them type of offense. They played Navy. They were laying 19. They scored 20. They played South Florida. They were laying 27. They scored 28. That ain't what you want from your favorites. Against Miami O, they lay in 23, they score 38. That's not enough. This is not an explosive offense. They're not running the football particularly well. The passing game's been spotty. And defensively, Cincy's very good, but this isn't the Cincinnati Bearcats defense of a year ago. This number looks, again, to be more than a little bit high for this better. And then you look at the Temple piece of the equation, and look, Temple was on the wrong end of the loss to the Houston team we just talked about last week, but they moved the ball up and down the field in that ball game. And again, I talked about how Houston's defense isn't particularly good. The game before, Temple moved the ball up and down the field, 277 on the ground, 344 through the air. They hung 54 on South Florida. They've just had their two best offensive games back-to-back in November. This is a team whose season-long stats right now aren't necessarily telling us the truth. Temple's covered, 4 in a row, all as underdog prices. Wouldn't be shocked in the slightest if they cover a 5th in a row this week.
Dog at home. Home dog might be barking there. Cincinnati and Temple. Next game up, 3 American games in the row. Navy at UCF. Seeing 11 a.m. Eastern kick. Not sure if the Wager Talk Live on screen has that correct, but hey, we're going to go with it. 8 a.m. Pacific in the bounce house. -16.5. That's UCF at home. 53 being the total. We get UCF, that is, off of beating Tulane. I'm pretty sure they're locked into the American Championship game now. Got a military academy coming in. I don't know, Teddy. You liking anything in Orlando?
No, I don't want the favorite in this one. You talked about all the reasons why UCF wouldn't be interested. And sorry, I just had one final point for Temple Cincinnati. Cincinnati 52, Temple 3 last year. Okay. In each of the 5 previous meetings, Temple either won or lost by less than a field goal against Cincinnati, despite the fact that these two programs have been in very different situations in recent years. Temple has given Cincinnati all kinds of problems. When it comes to UCF, you can't like the spot here for UCF. You can't like the matchups for UCF. You look at recent meetings between these two teams. Navy has been able to move the football against that defense. UCF with a ton of speed. They're certainly a very talented defense. When it comes to discipline, however, which is what you need most against the midshipmen, there have been issues in that regard for the Knights. And you talk about the bounce house as this is one of the stronger home fields in college football, and you get a rowdy night game or something like that. When you have an 11 a.m. kick, it's a different story in that regard. And again, Navy hasn't clinched anything. They're trying to play their way into bowl eligibility. I don't know if they could do it, but they don't look to me. And I go, they have Army as a finale, but that's 2 weeks from now. Wouldn't be surprised at all if Navy hangs around in this one against a UCF defense that has had their problems against the midshipmen in most recent meetings. Not last year, but every meeting before that. I'm sorry, last year too. I got too confused. I was talking about the Temple Cincy, where last year was a blow up, but before that, every year was competitive. This series has been competitive in every recent meeting.
We got Old Dominion and App State up next, Teddy. -16. That's App State is the home favorite, 51 being the total. Talked about it on last week's show, Old Dominion. Just being a school name, I found it kind of like, brought a smile to my face. There's actually a college called Old Dominion. And shout out to, I'll find their name by the end of the segment. They replied below in the reply section and said why. It's a old nickname for the state of Virginia. So thanks for that.
Cool.
Like learning that, new information. So ODU and App State here, Teddy. Anything on it?
So I talked about that one game against Coastal Carolina. I bring it up every week, Old Dominion, and that's why when you see the teams that you don't see every week and you get a chance to watch them, you don't overreact to any one game. That Coastal Carolina game, they scored 49. They had 324 on the ground and 201 in the air in that contest. Since that game, they played four times, and they haven't come close to 324 yards on the ground in the 4 games combined. The last 2 weeks at home against Marshall and James Madison, they've been outscored by a total of 49-3. They've committed 8 turnovers. It's been ugly, hard team to back. That said, App State's a hard team to back right now. Again, this is a team that had championship aspirations, and they ain't getting there now. Another loss last week. That's back-to-back losses. I said after the last week when we talked about this game versus Marshall. I'm like, I worry about App State's ability to bounce back off the third. It's one thing to bounce back off the first loss and then in a second loss. Once you start getting into third and fourth loss territory with teams that aren't supposed to be there, the bounce backs don't often come. So I can't lay with App State. I don't trust the dog. Easiest pass on the board.
Good stuff, Teddy. And that shout out is to Chris in the reply section. Old Dominion comes from an old nickname for the state of Virginia. So you learn something new every day. See if we can learn anything new here. Talking about the state of Virginia, Georgia State heads there to take on James Madison, the newest member to FBS football. JMU -9 at home here. Teddy, 52 being the total.
Yeah, and this is a game I don't really have a strong take on. I said that last week with James Madison. And James Madison snapped that 3-game skid with that 37-3 blowout over Old Dominion. Again, Old Dominion turned the ball over, but James Madison did whatever they wanted to offensively in that ballgame. After getting only 52 passing yards against Louisville, they had 304 last week. So a big improvement. Again, when they were moving the ball early in the season, it was one big passing game after the next. 394 against Arkansas State, 468 against Georgia Southern. It was only in the 2 losses against the better defenses that they faced where the passing game got shut down. And you look at the Georgia State piece of the equation, and again, they lose last week to Louisiana Monroe, and they had a blocked punt for a touchdown. They had an interception return for a touchdown. They won the yardage battle by 230 and found a way to lose the game. But Georgia State's not a clean team. You look at their turnovers, week in, week out, multiple turnover games. They've had a lot of problems with giveaways all season long. I'm not convinced that ends here. I guess I lean to the Dukes, but it's not a game I'm going to play.
At Teddy_covers on Twitter, WagerTalkSportsMemo.com. Part number 2 of the Every Game on the Board podcast. We head to the Big 12 up next. Texas at Kansas, 363-364. -9. That's the Longhorns on the road. 64 being the total in Lawrence, Teddy.
And of course, Kansas beat them last year. That was kind of the start of the Lance Leopold and what's going on at Kansas. It was when they hung 57 on the Longhorns a year ago. That was when Kansas was an emerging school, an emerging program. Now Kansas is being priced like a competitive team, which they should be. That being said, Kansas lost 4 of their last 5. The defense given up 35+ in each and every one of those defeats. The only win they had came against an Oklahoma State team that was, shall we say, not healthy. Turned the ball over 4 times. Whatever the Jayhawks were early in the season, they're wearing down. They're not as good. And look, Texas is now, 11-11 under Sark. Last week against TCU, the offense doesn't work again. All the love. I remember every time Ewers was going to play, we saw like a 3-point line move in favor of Texas. Ewers is sub 50% in his last 4 starts. Since that blowout win over Oklahoma, the QB play here has not been good. They've struggled with turnovers in recent weeks. Last week, the offense just didn't work. This is a big step down in defensive class compared to what they faced. Again, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, TCU the last 4 weeks. Big step down in defensive class for Texas. And the quotes I'm reading aren't making me think that Texas is done. Sometimes end of the season, things don't go right. Another disappointing campaign. You get a sense that, maybe next year for this team. If I'm playing, I'm laying. Longhorns are pass for this better. I think it's a Texas spot. And defensively, there's no comparison between these two teams. Kansas can't get stops. Texas can.
Let's head to the Plains up next, 4 o'clock Eastern on SEC Network, 365-366. Western Kentucky at Auburn, -5.5. That's the Tigers at home in Jordan-Hare, 52.5 being the total. Teddy, I'm thinking about going to this game, man. And we talked about it actually on Wager Talk today. Guys, on the Monday Wager Talk today, or Tuesday, that is. I kind of like Auburn here, Teddy. I really do. It might be the fan in me, but they're going for a bowl game. Carnell Williams, the head coach, I think they're motivated. I don't know. Western Kentucky's not bad, though. You like anything here, 5.5.
So, first of all, check out Drew's analysis on this game from Wager Talk today. I know they tweeted it out. I think they tweeted it out yesterday. It was on the Tuesday edition. And I thought it was a really great breakdown. And better than anything I could do. So I encourage you to listen to that where he makes this pretty strong case for Auburn. I'm going to make one anti-Western Kentucky case here. And it's worth noting. I mean, Ty Helton, the Western the Hilltoppers head coach, his name's been bandied about for the Auburn job. Who's going to get the new Auburn job? And Helton's name has been floated there. And if he gets a win in Auburn, it certainly helps his resume in that regard. But we've seen Western Kentucky go on the road. Let's see. Last year, they faced Michigan State. The year before, they faced Louisville. The year before, they also faced Louisville. They faced Wisconsin the year before that, and Illinois before that. They've, at Vandy, they played more than their fair share of games, step-up games. And they have a handful of times where they've been able to step up and win. But the vast majority of those step-up games from Western Kentucky have been pretty ugly. I'm not convinced this one is different, especially because Auburn, despite not facing an SEC foe this week, as you mentioned, looking to extend their season, they still have something to play for.
Next game up, guys, Iowa and Minnesota. Lowest totaled game on the board here, Teddy. 32.5. Actually, 32 starting to pop up. -2.5, -3. That's the Golden Gophers at home hosting Iowa.
And how do you play this one over? There's a chance for snow. And if there's an accumulation of snow, I may look to play over. I really might. Because snow's not going to help these defenses. It's only going to help the offenses. You worry about the icy conditions for offenses. You worry about the wind for offenses. In the snow, the defenses start to wear down, and you see the running plays that gain 2-3 yards all of a sudden gaining 20 yards once the defenses get down. Don't look now, but an Iowa offense that was held to 14 or less in 5 of their last 7 has scored 24 or more in each of the last 3 ball games. They move the football, and the defense continues. I mean, every week the defense is creating multiple turnovers. I've got them, 11 turnovers created the last 5 weeks. No one's running the ball on Iowa. No one's throwing the ball on Iowa. Tanner Morgan's hurt again for Minnesota. No one's convinced he's going to be back this week. He's had multiple head injuries. He's had multiple concussions this year. I'm not convinced he's coming back. But Minnesota's tough as nails. And that defense may well be every bit as good as Iowa's defense. I mean, they've allowed 13 or less in 7 of their 10 games this season. No, they couldn't handle the elite. They had a bad game at Penn State. They kind of had a bad game at Illinois as well on the ground. But by and large, Minnesota's defense has been rock solid. This game's going to come down to who makes the mistake. And there's a ton on the line. Both teams still very much in contention for the Big 12 West title. But, Minnesota scored 31 twice in the last 3 weeks. If it snows, I may play over. But, frankly, this has all the makings of a defensive scrub. If I'm playing over, I'm doing it with my, holding my nose and saying this number is just too low. But it's very realistic to think the first team to get to 14 wins this game.
Georgia Tech, North Carolina up next. UNC -3 touchdown favorites, 63.5 being the total in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, and you ever make a play? So I last week I bet on Georgia Tech for the second time this season, and both games were exactly the same. Georgia Tech was awful. They couldn't move the football, and they were out of it. And I was so mad at myself. I'm like, I learned that lesson, but I just wanted to keep betting against Miami. I'm like, you have to bet it. You're going to ride this betting against Miami the rest of the way. Until it loses. And that's what I did, and ended up being the wrong move. But my point is this. It wasn't like I was making a case for Georgia Tech. I was making an anti-Miami case and riding it to the end. There's no case to make for Georgia Tech right now. It's been an awful season for the Yellow Jackets. And again, last week, non-competitive in defeat. 4 turnovers. Each of the 2 backup quarterbacks threw a pair of interceptions. Defense got pushed around at the line of scrimmage. Offense can't trade points with anyone. These are problems for Georgia Tech that have not been solved. It's mid-November. They're not going to be solved. There was some talk Jeff Sims could be back. I haven't seen any indication that's the case. I'm not convinced he'll be in midseason form if he does come back at QB for the Ramblin' Wreck. North Carolina just played their way into the ACC title game. And I'm not convinced that they're going to be fully interested in this one. Tar Heels also don't have the type of defense that makes it easy to lay 3 touchdowns with. So that's not a spot where I'm looking to play with the favorite. But I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest if North Carolina punches them. I'm not convinced Georgia Tech punches back, and this could be a blowout.
Teddy covers. Check him out. WagerTalkSportsMemo.com. We got 3 games left. We'll get a most confident play at the end. He's over 71%. All sports last 3 days, over 70% this month in the NFL November, and 55%, guys, going all the way back to 2015 in the sport of, in the NFL, actually, is 5% big ticket plays. All sports since May 2021. He's 47-22. That's 68%. Look out for those 5% plays. WagerTalkSportsMemo.com. Teddy covers. 3 games left. UMass, Texas A&M, minus 33.5. That's the Aggies at home. How do you lay that number? Well, I guess that says a lot about UMass. 47.5 being the total, like in anything in College Station, Teddy.
Yeah, I'm only counting 2 games left, so if there's a third game, you're going to have to inform me of which game that is, because I don't think I'm prepped for it.
There is only 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. I can go off the top with anything, but we're in the home stretch of part 2 of every game on the board. I mean, UMass had the best offensive game of the season last week against Arkansas State. They hung 35 points. They covered as 17-point dogs. They rushed for $168. They threw for over 300. They haven't come close to doing that all season. My hunch is yards may be a little bit harder to come by this week. And, of course, it's an offense that had scored 10 against UConn, 13 against New Mexico State, 7 against Buffalo, 0 against Temple, 10 against Toledo, and 10 against Tulane. UMass is a bottom feeder at the tail end of the season, going a long way from home to face a team that is still playing for bowl eligibility. And, I guess nothing's gone right for the Aggies. But, I mean, if you grade out the personnel for these 2 teams, this is a 7-touchdown game. You know what I mean? If Texas A&M has anything in the tank, and they might this week, this might be the game where they're like, hey, we can beat somebody. And of course, they've got LSU in the season finale on deck. But what have they lost? 6 in a row now?
Yeah.
They haven't scored more than 31 in any game all year. Obviously, it's hard to lay this price with Texas A&M. But I don't want the dog. It's favored to pass for me.
Last game here, Teddy, as we go down to rotation number 374. That's UAB at LSU, 9 p.m. Eastern kick. So that's 8 p.m. local time on the Bayou. They will be good and hydrated there in Louisiana. Minus 14.5. Baton Rouge, that is the Tigers at home. 52.5 being the total.
Yeah, and UAB was a team. When I gave you the losses from Western Kentucky, I wanted to give you the losses from UAB. That's what I was hoping to do. So UAB has faced in recent years. They've gone to Georgia, lost that game 56-7. 2020, they went to Miami, failed to cover there, lost by 3 scores. 2019, they go to Tennessee, failed to cover there. They lost that game by 4 scores. In 2018, they go to Texas A&M. They lose that game by 3 scores, failed to cover. 2017, you get my point. They played Florida that year, late in the season. They lost that game by 5 scores, failed to cover. UAB hasn't been covering these games. Okay, flat out. Haven't come close in the majority of them. And look, the offense is clicking the last couple of weeks, 200 on the ground, 200 through the air. We're scared to step in front of teams like that in general, a team that are really clicking offensively. But LSU's defense is a different animal than North Texas or Florida Atlantic or Charlotte or the team that they've been moving the ball on so effectively of late. I do not trust this dog. But LSU, they just clinched their spot in the SEC title game. I know there are tiebreakers and all of that, but they own all the tiebreakers with the teams that they're and messed with. And I think they clinched it for LSU. So you do worry about the focus level and motivation this week. But again, UAB, given that track record, many of their opponents during these spans have been in similar questionable spots. The Blazers haven't been able to hang tough.
That does it for part number 2. We got a most confident play from Teddy coming up. But, guys, make sure to check him out. WagerTalkandSportsMemo.com. One of the hottest handicappers right now and long-term as well. Up over 70% winners this month. last 3 days. If you're looking for a hot handicapper, check him out. Teddy covers, obviously knows his college football as well. Teddy, you're taking next week off for Thanksgiving, so we'll try to get him back on for bowl season, but no promises. This might be his last segment here for Every Game on the Board in 2022. So, Teddy, any final thoughts for the listeners? And if you got a most confident play for us.
Drew, you and I both know that at some point in December, we'll sit down and do another podcast. We'll figure out a way when it's going to be. So I do not expect this to be my last show. And I don't know how you're going to do it for bowl season, but I'm sure we'll end up doing at least one more. But no, I will not be around for next week's Every Game on the Board. I'm traveling for the holidays. Stick around in Vegas for Christmas. Stick around in Vegas for New Year's. Thanksgiving is when I take off. Most confident play, look. UCF's a really good team. Navy isn't. But Navy is going to give that team some problems, I would expect. An 11 a.m. kickoff at the Bounce House is not maximum home field advantage for that venue. And I'm expecting a relatively close game. I don't think UCF runs them out. Give me the midshipmen plus 16.5 as my most confident play for this week.
The big underdog early. That's the first game on Saturday for Teddy covers. Guys, feel free to respond below. Let me know who you want me to ask to fill in for Teddy next week. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion. Wager Talk YouTube channel, Drew Martin Bets YouTube channel, wherever you're downloading your podcast at, Every Game on the Board podcast. And we'll try to get a replacement for him. So check Teddy covers out, wagertalksportsmemo.com. That does it for part number 3. Huge shout out to Teddy Covers. Guys, check him out. And we will be back with Kelly Stewart here in about an hour with part number 3. So cash those tickets until then. Thanks for tuning in.